The most obvious outcomes of reproductive processes still remain the generation of individuals of similar design. The rules of heredity determine the process by which traits and characteristics are reliably inherited. Let us take a close at these rules. Inherited traits. What exactly do we mean by similarities and differences? We know that a child bears all the basic features of human being. However, it does not look exactly like its parents, and human populations show a great deal of variations. Rules for the inheritance of traits models contributions. The rule of inheritance of such traits in human beings are related to the fact that both the father and the mother contribute physically equal amounts of genetic material to the child. This means that each trait be influenced by both parental and maternal DNA. Thus, for each trait, there will be two variations in child. With what will then the trait seen in the child be? Mendel's work out the main rules of such inheritance, and it is interesting to look at some of his experiments from more than a century ago. Mendel used a number of contrasting visible characters of garden peas, round wrinkled seeds, tall short plants, white violet flowers, and so on. He took pea plants with different characteristics, a tall plant and a short plant, produced progeny from them, and calculated the percentages of tall or short progeny. In the first place, there was no halfway characteristics in this first generation or F1 progeny, no median height plants. All plants were tall. This meant that only one of parental traits was seen, not some maximum of two. So the next question was, were the tall plants in the F1 generation exactly the same as tall plant of the parent generation? Mendelian experiments test this by getting both the parental plants and these F1 tall plants to reproduce by self-pollination. The progeny of the parental plants are of course all tall. However, the second generation or F2 progeny of the F1 tall plants are not all tall. Instead, one quarter of them are short. This indicates that both the tallness and shortness traits were inherited in the F1 plant, but only the tallness trait was expressed. Thus, two copies of trait are inherited in each sexually reproducing organism. These two may be identical or may be different depending on the percentage. A pattern of inheritance can be worked out with this assumption as shown in figure 9.3. In this explanation, both TT and TT are tall plants, while only TT is a short plant. In other words, a single copy of T is enough to make the plant tall, while both copies have to be T for plant to be short. Traits like T are called dominant traits, while those that behave like T are called recessive traits. Work out which trait will be considered dominant and which one recessive in figure 9.4. What happens when pea plants showing two different characteristics rather than just one are bred with each other? What do the progeny of a tall plant with round seeds and a short plant with wrinkled seeds look like? They are all tall and have round seeds. Tallness and round seeds are thus dominant traits. But what happens when these F1 progeny are used to generate F2 progeny by self-pollination? A median a Mendelian experiment will find that some F2 progeny are tall plants with round seeds and some were short plants with wrinkled seeds. However, there would be also F2 progeny that shows new mixtures. Some of them will be tall but have wrinkled seeds, while other would be short but have round seeds. Thus, the tall short trait and the round seed wrinkled seed trait are independently inherited. Another example is shown in figure 9.5. How do these traits get expressed? How does the mechanism of heredity works? Cellular DNA is the information source for making proteins in the cells. A section of DNA that provides information for one protein is called the gene for the protein. How do the protein control the characteristics that we discuss here? Let us take the example of tallness as a characteristic. We know that plants have hormones that can trigger growth. Plant height can thus depend on the amount of particular plant hormone. The amount of plant hormone made will depend on the efficiency of process for making it. Consider now an enzyme that is important for this process. If this enzyme works efficiently, a lot of hormones will be made and the plant will be tall. If this gene for that enzyme has a alteration that makes the enzyme less efficient, the amount of hormone will be less and the plant will be short. Thus, gene controls characteristics of traits. If the interpretations of Mendelian experiments we have been discussing are correct, then both parents must be contributing equally to the DNA of progeny during sexual reproduction. We have discussed this issue in the previous chapter. If both parents can help determine the trait in the progeny, both parents must be contributing a copy of same gene. This means that each pea plant must have two sets of all genes, one inherited from each parent. For this mechanism to work, each germ cell must have only one gene set. How do germ cells make a single set of genes from the normal two copies that all other cells in the body have? If the progeny plant inherited a single whole gene set from each parent, then the experiment in figure 9.5 can't work. This is because the two characters R and Y would be then be linked to each other and cannot be independently inherited. This explained by the fact that each gene set is present not as single long thread of DNA but as separate independent pieces, each called a chromosome. Thus, each cell will have two copies of each chromosome, one each from male and female parents. Every germ cell will take one chromosome from each pair, and these may be of either material or parental origin. Which two germ cells combine, they will restore the normal number of chromosomes in progeny, ensuring the sustainability of DNA of the species. Such a mechanism of inheritance explains the results of Mendel experiments and used by all sexually reproducing organisms. But asexual reproducing organisms also follow similar rules of inheritance. Can we work out how their inheritance might work?